I am Curran Bhatia for Ask the Experts. I'm speaking to LJ Harrison, brother of Tony Harrison, strength coach of Tony Harrison. So, LJ, we know that you and Tony just came off of the epic fight with Jermell Charlo, the rematch for the super welterweight title. And we'll get into the fight, but there was obviously a lot of bad blood leading up to this rematch. As it was coming closer, did this fight mean more than other fights because it was a rematch? It was for the world championship, and obviously all the bad blood that had come together in the last year.
It meant more. I wouldn't say because of the bad blood. I think it meant more for Tony because I think his legacy was on the line, like defining himself as a true champion, more than anything. So I don't think it was because of the trash talking or anything else. Because like any sports event, that's what athletes do sometimes. But I think for him it was more of just want to prove himself and be solidified as a true world champion.
And he had his first crack, Tony Harrison did, at Jermell Charlo. That was a year ago, December 22nd,
Mm-hmm.
2018. He was able to get the win, able to become world champion. In the interim period, the rematch was supposed to happen in summer of 2019.
Right.
Tony had the ankle injury. Now, there was speculation. I think it was from Charlo's team and other people's. Oh, it's that ankle injury to kind of push it off. And what
Mm,
what was going on? You were with Tony obviously the whole time. So what was going on? The ankle injury. He was obviously
right.
a boot, and he wasn't able to compete in summer, right?
Right. He did injure his ankle. I forgot at what point of training camp it was, but he tore some ligaments in his ankle. He wanted to get surgery, but me personally, I suggested him not to get it because I feel like the athlete that he is, as far as being mobile and slick, anytime you have screws, anything like that, it would, hinder his movement in his ankle. And I also told him not to take the fight. He wanted to continue to fight, but I also told him not to do it because if he was to lose at that moment, then nobody would want to hear any excuse as far as his injury or anything like that. And I just told him I feel like if you're an athlete and once you get into that ring, then it's on. It's like you can't really use no excuse. So I told him to just wait until he's 100% ready. He had a boot for about, I want to say, a month or two. We went down to Dallas to see a ankle specialist, and he treated him, and he said it would be fine. And that's what we just did. We just took our time, and I gave him rehab, and he was good.
And that must have made your job a little bit harder because you have to recover from an injury and
Mm-hmm.
prepare for a rematch, a world championship rematch. So we finally get to the fight, December 21st, 2019. Jermell Charlo. All this smack talk is done, and both
Mm-hmm.
guys get into the ring. Jermell came out very aggressive early. He's throwing these big looping shots. Did you have to get in your brother's ear and say, "Hey, stay calm and let's kind of get past his initial aggressiveness"?
I think that was part of the plan anyway. I mean, the guy that I brought in was Nate Gallimore. Nate, not so much wild, but just as far as his Nate focusedness to try to hurt you with every punch. And that was my purpose of bringing him in because we knew that Charlo was probably going to do the same thing. Charlo's probably a little bit sharper than Nate, but I mean, both of their intentions are the same, and they both got some power. And that was always our intentions, was to get him prepared for Charlo for every second and every round to try to take your head off. And that's exactly what Charlo did. He had that focusedness for the whole fight. That was his game plan, and he stuck with that. And so I think Charlo did good at sticking with his game plan, which we prepared for him to try to hurt Tony with every shot that he threw.
Jermell came out very aggressive. It seemed like
Mm-hmm.
there was a little bit of a chip on his shoulder because obviously he felt like he won the first fight, and that it was even more important for him to get his world title back. But
Mm-hmm.
but to Tony's credit, he stayed calm. He's landing these sneaky right hands. He's controlling Charlo's aggression. But in the second round, there was a quick knockdown. Charlo knocked
Mm-hmm.
down Tony. Now Tony literally popped right back up. So
Right.
my question is, you watching, did
Mm-hmm.
you in your head did you hope that, hey, Tony, get your bearings about you, you don't have to pop right back up? Because sometimes in boxing we see a fighter pop right back up and he doesn't have his wits about him and he can kind of
Right.
should have spent more time on the ground. So when you
Mm-hmm.
saw that, what were you thinking?
The second knockdown, I kind of knew it was a flash. The way he got up and shook his head. I knew he was fine then. Um, I think he did, like you said, I think he did good of keeping his composure, but I think he knew he won the first round and he got knocked down the second round. I think he knew he had to come out and kind of like be more assertive. You know what I'm saying? Because I think he knew that particular knockdown could change the fight for him because he always felt like he was the B side anyway. So I think that when he got knocked down, the second round it was more of a flash, but he knew from then he had to change his game style. Um, I think originally, like I said, we was prepared for that type of for him to stay on the outside. But I think when you in the heat of the battle, I think when he got knocked down, he knew he probably had to change his style because Charlo was preparing for the wild shots. So I think he wanted to smother his shots and get in the inside, and it actually started working, and that's what made him a little bit easier to keep his composure.
And whatever Tony did in terms of adjustments were definitely
Hmm.
working. So
Right,
through the sixth round, if you watch the fight, you can hear the announcers say that you could make a case that Tony had won every single round except for that second round with the knockdown. So he was
right,
obviously able to move forward with his game plan. So in
right.
through the middle of the fight, you happy with what you were seeing from your brother Tony?
I was extremely happy because I when I see Tony spar, that's usually how he fights, but when he get into a real fight, he's a good boxer, so he uses angles, his slickness. But to see that type of fight and adjustment made in that type of fight, I was extremely proud of him because I've never seen him actually I'm not gonna say he's never been a dog, but that's my first time actually seeing him in a fight that matters, dig deep against a true champion like Charlo and compete at that type of level, at that type of fight, and that type of style. So I think through round I was happy, honestly, all the way into the knockdown in the 11th round. I thought he controlled the fight. I thought the adjustment he made was perfect. When I talked to him, he said that's just what he felt he had to do at that time is just switch the style and go get it.
And we'll get to the end of the fight, but
Mm-hmm.
before that, it was a very close fight. It seemed that in every round, the punch stats were within one or two of each other, which means
Right.
it was a really really close fight. So the one thing I wanted to ask you before we talk about the end of the fight is something I noticed as an observer. I thought Tony was doing even better than he did in his first fight with Jermell. I thought he was really executing the game plan. He was landing those sneaky right hands, and those were getting Jermell Charlo's attention for sure. And he was
Mm-hmm.
scoring.
Right.
The one thing I want to ask you about though, Tony did a little bit of showboating. So Jermell would land a combination, Tony would cover up, and then he would start doing a little bit of showboating. I'm just curious, your thoughts as someone close to him. What were your thoughts of what Tony was trying to say with that showboating there?
I mean, obviously, that's not something we'd like for him to do. I think every loss Tony had as a team, we've grown from it. I think the first two fights, I kind of took the blame as far as not really getting him prepared in shape. But I think the last 3, 4 fights, I've done a good job of adjusting him to be in shape. I think he was in tremendous shape. I think he looked good. I think he was ready to go the distance. This fight, particular, this loss, I think we focused on him just mentally being sharp. And to give Charlo credit, like I have done the whole camp, even though him and Tony had bad blood, to give Charlo credit, he stayed focused on his game plan. He had the mentality of a champion. He showed why he was a champion. He stayed focused. He didn't showboat. Not to say that's why Tony lost, but I think just mentally, that's something we got to work on him and just locking in and understanding like these type of fights, you have to be sharp from 1 to 12. You have to have that mindset to win every second of every round. You made a great adjustment. Now you got to just focus on bringing it home, even though he may not hurt you, which is what he felt. Charlo didn't hurt him, but I think mentally, just with the showboating, he got too comfortable. And that's something that he just expressed to me. He felt real good in there. He felt real comfortable, and he just started to let his guard down a little bit. He left a tight bunny rabbit, and it got a little loose. And so that's just something we got to just work on, man. I think we learn from that, just staying focused and staying sharp down the stretch.
And he was able to stay sharp through the fight, and actually at the end of the 11th at the end of the 10th round, if you look at the
Mm,
punch stats, it said 113 to 112. So that's how close it was in terms
right.
of punches landed. Obviously there's more to to a fight than just punches landed, but that does tell a big picture of the story. So Tony's cruising, he's doing his thing, and then the big left hook in the 11th round, Charlo drops Tony. So when you first saw that first knockdown in round 11, what was going through your head?
The first thing that went to my head was he was gonna get up. I figured in my opinion, if I was a judge, I figured that knockdown was enough to get a draw, was enough to get Jamil a draw, because I feel like Tony won round 1. I feel he lost 2, and I feel that he controlled the fight from 3 to 11. That's just my personal opinion. I'm not being biased. I always tell Tony when I think he's losing or it was close. I think that the way he adjusted in the third and dominated and control, his controlled aggression, his combinations. I thought he would have got up. I thought that was a little bit of a flash too. Obviously, I'm not in there, and Tony actually told me that the shot actually was a good shot. It snuck in just right inside of the guard. But I thought he would have got up and continued, and I thought that would have been enough for at least a draw. That's just my opinion. But I thought he would have been able to get up. I thought he was good to continue. But hey, the judges, we don't make excuses. The judge, the referee seen what he seen, and he made the decision to stop it.
And so that first knockdown, Tony
Mm-hmm.
goes down in the 11th round. And I just want to know your perspective, because not only are you his strength coach, but you're his brother. So you've been with him
Mm-hmm.
since the beginning, and he's
Right.
competing at such a high level here. I don't mean to go back on how tough it was, but
Right.
is something, was it extra meaningful in a painful way to see him go down there?
Now you mean just far as the knockdown, or far as just the fight, the ref calling the fight off?
The first that knockdown in round 11, when he started to get in trouble there in the 11th
Okay.
round, was that extra tough because you're not only a strength coach but you're his brother?
It's always tough. It's always tough because, I think it's very tough. Even the second round knockdown, there's a flash. It's very tough because you prepare, for 8 weeks. We got away from home. We did everything correct. And I also know, like, when Tony being behind that 8 ball, like being a B-side fighter, a simple knockdown like that, even though it might hurt you or not, could really change the complex of everything. Luckily he was able to recover. But I mean, even on the points, because a lot of them rounds, it could have went either way, to tell you the truth. I felt like he was winning, but it was a lot of times where Tony was showboating and Charlo snuck in some good combinations. So, depending on how you're looking at it, it could have went either way. So I think that knockdown is always tough. Every time I see my brother get knocked down, it's always tough.
And so Tony gets knocked down the first time. He gets up, and Charlo kind of swarms him.
Right.
And Tony goes down for the second time in the 11th round. Now, it seemed like Jack Reese was about to call it right then. Charlo
Right.
was celebrating, and Tony, to his credit, he got up. He was able to regain his composure, but he definitely looked hurt. Did you want him to continue at that point? Because he did look hurt at that point.
Right. I mean, that's it's tough. It's a tough thing, man, because me knowing my brother, I know he'd rather really get put on his back. You know what I mean? Like, he really rather, if he gonna lose, if he wanted to lose either through the scorecard, or he wanted to be like in Charlo's words, like through the smelling salt. Like, he would have had to just been flat on his back and just not responding. You know what I'm saying? So, but it's also, as a brother, it's hard to see my brother like that as well. So it's tough, man. He did look hurt, so I could honestly see why the referee stopped the fight. He didn't have his legs on the second knockdown. But I've seen fights worse than that keep going. So it's just hard. I don't really know what the referee looked for, in certain fights. But it's a tough thing. So he did look hurt. I could honestly see it, but also know Tony, he was fine. You know what I mean? He could have probably kept going. I probably would have gave it one more chance, like, to, but that's just me.
Yeah, Jack Reese had a tough job that night, and I
Right.
after the fight that I thought he did a great job. So Tony gets up from the second knockdown, and then Charlo starts swarming him. Tony was defending, but he wasn't
Right.
throwing.
Right.
And Jack Reese waved off the fight, and you could see Tony visibly saying no, no.
Right.
Obviously,
Right.
this was so meaningful for him. He had been world champion for a full year, and he was doing so well in this fight. You could
Right.
tell that it was so frustrating for him. I'm sure that as much as that you wanted to protect his safety, it was also frustrating for you at that moment as well.
Yeah, it was extremely frustrating because I knew at that moment when the referee stopped it. I mean, even though Tony is not throwing punches, he is protecting himself, right? So I mean, it's just hard to say. Maybe some fighters might need, he might not be throwing nothing, but he might be protecting himself and just he not getting hit with nothing hard. It's just the fact that Charlo just keeps swinging, So but sometimes also the second a referee wave off a fight, a fighter might just snap out of it at that particular moment and say, no, I'm good now. So it's just hard. I'm more so disappointed in the fact that he worked hard. You know, he worked extremely hard. He a good guy. You know, he do a lot for his community. You know, he do a lot for his family. And he didn't come to lay down. We didn't come to lay down. You know, we was always behind the eight ball the first fight, the second fight. And, you know, we didn't come to lay down. We wasn't satisfied. We worked hard. You know, we game plan. And so it's not like we just got the belt and start, you know, doing whatever and just took the year off, you know. So it's more so disappointing about that.
And on the scorecards, 96, 93, two of the cards for Charlo, but one of the cards had Tony up 94 to
Mm-hmm.
95 to 94. Now, obviously, that doesn't include the knockdowns and what happened in that round, but
Right,
and there's no moral victories in boxing. But do you guys take a little bit
right.
of pride in that? That hey, he was up on one of the judges' scorecards at that point.
I honestly would feel better. I mean, I feel like I mean, granted, with that Judge Shaw, I agree, but me personally, I feel like just to have two judges just have him winning by 2 or 3 rounds was ridiculous to me. That's ridiculous to me. Now, you know, Charlo won the belt fair and square through a knockout. We can't control that, but what we can control is like I feel like I'm also a fan too of the sport. You know what I'm saying? So to see that type of scoring, I don't think that was right. I think that no matter what Tony did that fight, he wasn't going to win that fight based on them scorecards. I don't think in no shape or form or fashion was he down 3 rounds I mean, even with the knockdown. I thought that the adjustment he made and controlling that fight from 3 to 10 was a deal breaker. You know, they both got off some good shots, but to me, it was clear who the sharper fighter was, who the bigger fighter was, who the stronger fighter was, who the more IQ fighter was. You know, who dictated the pace. It was clear. You know, so you know, I think that was. I don't think that scorecard was right at all, though. Me personally, but
And it was a tough assignment overall, and it is a very close fight. Based on the
mm,
scorecards, it seemed like Tony would have had to get a knockdown or do something.
exactly, right,
So the fight ends. Obviously, Tony's disappointed. You're disappointed.
right,
When we're watching on TV, you can see Charlo come up to Tony. There had been so
mm,
much bad blood, and it seemed like reluctantly Tony kind of shook his hand. What
right.
what happened there? What was Charlo saying there?
Well, you know, my thing is even at the post conference, Tony went over and gave him a hug, gave Derrick James a hug, the coach. So at the end of the day, this is what I take from those two great competitors. As a fan, that's what the sport is about.
Right.
You know, that's what the sport is about. I don't, me personally, I don't have any bad blood towards any Charlo or the coach. Them two guys, they did what they did, had to do to sell the fight, whatever. But I think as a fan, that's the only thing I took from that two fight is you just saw two great competitors who wanted to win, elite athletes, two champions put on a great championship fight. At the end of all the talking, they shook hands like men. And I think how could either one of their stock lose after that type of performance, after that type of sportsmanship when it's over? I think somebody had to lose, somebody had to win. Obviously, we would have loved to have been on the winning side, but the only more victory we got from what just happened is that it was two great champions that put on an amazing championship fight. Obviously, the numbers spoke for itself with the views, and that's it, man. You know, at Keith Thurman fought Pacquiao when somebody had to lose. You know, so I can go on about that, but we didn't come to lay down. We came to fight. We put on a gutsy performance. Charlo did as well, and that's just what we take from it, man. It was two great champions that was in shape, that wanted to win, and Tony got hit with a good shot, and it's a fight for the books.
Just like Keith Thurman, I think Keith Thurman's stock went up actually in the loss to
Right.
Pacquiao. And I think the same thing for Tony Harrison here. I think his stock definitely rose big time as a competitor, as a warrior, leaving it all on the line.
Exactly.
I tweeted after the
Exactly.
fight, I said, this is why we love this sport, fights like this. And it's
Exactly.
absolutely 100% a fight of the year candidate. It must
Exactly.
be in the discussion. So your position is that it was two warriors. They shook hands like men after. Is that Tony's position too? Does he feel like the beef is kind of resolved now in terms of the personal, back and forth with him and Charlo?
I didn't really ask him. I feel like, he's his own man. Me personally, I honestly don't see what, it's funny because all the stuff that they did, like the hate, me personally, I don't think what they was even mad about was that serious to get to that point. But, every man feel, his own. I think Charlo lied or whatever. So I think that at the end of the day, I don't think Tony will ever really be completely happy with the fact that when we won, we gave your just due, and then you do that, and then when you win, now you all smiles again, and you giving us our just dues. And we just feel like, as a man, whether you win or lose, especially in the sport of boxing, you have to give a man respect for what he did, no matter what the judge did, what the referee did. And that's what we did the first fight. That's what we did the second fight. Even though we lost, we didn't question the referee. He won fair and square. We went and shook his hand like a man. We didn't like it, but that's what it is. But I do think that Tony's stock is hot right now, because even though he lost, he showed he has that championship gut to go out there and compete with the best and make it a fight. He's not just some slick boxer that likes to run. He's not just an athlete that's not in shape. Only thing you can take from this fight is that he lost from a good shot, from a good competitor, and that's really all that it was.
No, exactly. His stock is definitely on the rise. His losses, Tony's 3 losses, have been knockout losses. So if that says anything, he's a competitor. He goes out on his shield. And, the beef had all started in the first fight. When Tony won, Charlo went on national television and said, oh, Tony said that I actually won.
Right.
He, of course, denies that. Knowing Tony's personality, it's hard for me to imagine that he would have said something like that.
Right.
But obviously that's between them. So after the fight, I thought Tony was very respectful in terms of his post-fight comments. And even though he told Jack Reese when it was happening, he said, no, don't stop it, he didn't argue about that stoppage afterwards. He said that was the right thing that should have been done. So I thought that he definitely gets respect for that, for not making any excuses. He made absolutely no excuses. So the question is now, what is next? For you, for Team Harrison, for Tony? Obviously, he probably wants the trilogy fight.
Right.
We don't know if he'll get that fight. But is that your position too? Do you want another crack at Jermell Charlo?
Of course. I think Jermell brought the absolute best out of Tony, as far as physically, mentally. I think Jermell showed Tony that you are able to be in shape. You are able to fight with the best. You are able to make adjustments when it's needed. I think the thing that we need to do now was also taught Tony, not the good, but the bad, is you have to stay focused for 12 rounds, because I'm a champion as well. So I think once we put all that together, Tony as an athlete, as a fighter, will be better. I think him winning that championship first also guarantee him another title shot at some point. And I also think, on top of that, the performance that Tony just put on also guarantees him another title shot. So, we got to we want the big fights now. Just say the truth. We felt like we earned our dues. We were champion. We didn't lay down for nobody. We fought everybody they asked. And, at this point, he just wants the big fights at 54. So it's only so many, I think. But, I think that's what he got to do. So obviously we got to wait to see what J-Rock and Charlo going to do. But, we want the big fights, whether it's Hurd or, a good competitor like Lubin or, Lauer or any of them good champs. So, that's where we at.
No, I agree with you completely. I think anyone watching became a Tony Harrison fan after that performance. Right. So just to close it out, obviously it's the end of the decade here, and Tony actually turned pro in 2011. Now, you've obviously been with him for a long time as his brother, as his strength coach. So just to take a second and look back at all he's achieved and you've achieved as a team in the last decade, coming up the ranks, having that undefeated record to a certain point, getting 2 losses, and then learning from those, coming back, challenging for the 154-pound championship and winning it, and coming off of a fight of the year candidate in what we saw a few weeks ago. So when you reflect and look back at the decade, when you guys first started in the professional ranks, did you even think that this high of a level would be possible?
Well, first of all, as a man, I don't think it gets any higher than Tony Harrison as far as a man, what he stands for. Me personally, I had a terrible, I'm not gonna say terrible, but I had a bad basketball career overseas. I didn't have anything to my name when I came home, but the fact that he bought that gym, it gave me a way to make my own money outside of, training him. It gave me a way to provide for myself and my family. The things that he do for his family, he bought his houses, he bought his cars, he helps the community. So as a man, anytime you're in a position to not just feed your family, but get them a way to make their own life, I don't think, as a man first, it don't get any better than Tony Harrison and what he's done for his family. Second, I always knew he would be a great champion because even when we was young, we worked hard. I mean, we've been working out since literally since we was 11 to 12, running miles at 5 in the morning. So I always felt like if not both of us, one of us was destined for great things. And, my career didn't go the way I wanted it. So I put my all into making my brothers become true. So I think I always knew he would be here. Obviously, I don't think he would take 3 losses to do it, but God don't make mistakes. And I feel like, it's something else that he has in store for Tony. I don't think he's done. I think Tony wants to come back. He's hot right now. He's very confident. So I think as a man and as an athlete, I'm super proud of, what he's become, and I'm super proud of that what we become as a family because we could have been quit and broke up, or he could have trained and got with somebody else. But the fact that we stayed together through the good, the losses, and the bad, it shows you the character that we have as a team and as a family.
Certainly, and you and Tony and the whole Harrison crew can hold their heads high, enjoy
Hmm.
the holidays, and as you said, very active in the community I visited, and I know that Tony teaches young kids in the gym.
Right.
I know he's very active in the Detroit community, so I want to first of all thank you for your time, LJ, for giving us perspective of the inner circle. I want to wish you and the rest of Team Harrison best of luck. And I can say, as a spectator, I am definitely looking forward to seeing Tony Harrison come back into that ring. I'm sure a lot of boxing fans feel the same way, and I'm sure that
Yep.
you guys are looking forward to a big 2020. So thank you so much for the time.
I appreciate you reaching out, man. Anytime you need me, anytime, just give me a holler. You got it.